So the verdict is in, and
what verdict?
The inquest jury came back. What did the inquest jury say?
So it was a split decision. 4 said it was justified and 2 unjustified.
What does unjustified mean?
That Mr. Faletogo died by criminal means. Mo, you're happy to explain this as well. You don't just have to ask.
No, I want to know what you think. I'm really interested.
Well, this isn't what I
think.
think. These are just facts.
Okay. So tell because people are listening and they're going to want to get a little background about the facts. I know we spoke about them a little bit the last time we talked upstairs, but you got an opportunity to talk to the jury. I was there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the jury thought? Was there any frustrations that they had?
Yeah, the jury was very thoughtful. I think they took their duty very seriously, and that's all you can ask for. The way inquests are structured, though, you only look at the specific officer that pulled the trigger.
Okay.
And so what we heard a lot about from this group of citizens of Seattle, or King County, was that they had wanted to go beyond that and look at what the other officers that were involved in this tragedy, and they called it a tragedy, and they called it preventable. So I thought that was fascinating. They had really taken issue with not the officer that ultimately pulled the trigger, but the officers around him that contributed to the situation, whether that be yelling, he has a gun or he's reaching, and the other officers contributed to that fear of this being very threatening, even though we know, the first image of on body-worn video after Mr. Faletogo shot is the gun 3 feet away from his foot, his right foot, I believe. So not within reach. And the jurors recognized that. All of them did. The 2 that found criminal means said that played heavily into their favor. The other, I didn't hear all of them speak up, but I remember 2 others said what really drove their decision was what the involved officer was hearing from other officers.
One of the jurors said that they felt the Seattle Police Department was maybe not legally responsible, but morally responsible.
I didn't recall that.
That's one of the comments.
Really?
Written comments.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, it's on the written comments.
Yes.
Oh.
They're comments. If you look at the verdicts afterwards.
I didn't read the written comments.
You got to read the written comments.
Okay,
They're
so tell me what other... So I noticed that there was like a thing going around with like a long thing with handwriting on it. So
yes.
I was wondering what
Those
that
are
was.
their comments.
Because I read the verdict. Mm-hmm. I scrolled down the 100 or so. What was it? 89 question? 89,
question,
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't see... Was that forwarded to us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I must have just missed it.
One of the jurors thought that Seattle Police Department was morally responsible because none of the officers appeared to them to be trained to handle this situation. Yeah. Imagine 6 police officers, people given guns to go out on the streets, right? Given the authority to use those guns, given the authority to use force, take force, and take lives, that they utterly failed to train them to remove the gun from near him and neutralize him and arrest him, and felt they were morally responsible. Now, another juror in front of us said that he was executed. Mm-hmm. What do you mean? What do you think the juror meant by that?
Well, I'm not going to...
Well, you tell me what you think that means.
I'm not going to put words into the juror's mouth. But going back to kind of the whole situation and the officers involved, and it really struck me when they were talking about how you had 6 people show up and they commented like a lot of officers weren't doing anything. And you had the gun right next to them. They didn't see it. They didn't do anything. They weren't doing anything. And if they were contributing to the fear in the situation. I think it's a mishandling of a situation. But, you know, you had an SPD official come and talk about their training. And I thought he was a little too pro-police, but he seemed to know what I mean by that is he was too party line about it. Because I think I asked him, you know, what does having a gun in any situation turn it into a deadly force situation? He goes, no, we can use time, distance, shielding. If I was in my SWAT gear, you know, I'd be communicating with my team members around me to try and neutralize the threat. So that means get the gun out of this person's hand. And none of that happened here. And so, you know, you look back at the situation, someone has a gun, they're never pointing it at you. They're running away from you. All indications are they're trying to get away from you, not engage in a fight.
Yeah.
And yet this person's dead.
Okay. So they also thought that their police expert, their use of force expert, was not credible. Who
when you say there, who do you mean?
Their Dr. Alpert.
Yeah.
They didn't find him credible.
Yeah, but you said there. This is hired by the Inquest program coordinators, right?
Right.
Yeah. So not. I mean, most other witnesses, all the other witnesses were City of Seattle.
They were all City of
Seattle.
Seattle.
They were all City of Seattle. So this was the only one that was.
And what did this expert say? What did they say that was force justified? They said, what else? What did they say? You examined the witness.
Yeah.
What did you do with the witness? What was your process of revealing the witness's biases, limitations in his opinions?
I don't get your question.
What were his opinions?
I mean, he had a lot of opinions.
What was the central opinion that he had?
That the force was justified. I don't know you explain it.
Well, the jury did not find him credible.
Yes.
Why?
You're going to have to tell me.
Well, they said that he said that when the police officer pulled up, Mr. Faletogo got out of the car, and he said that's what's called pre-flight indicators. What are pre-flight indicators? Pre-flight indicators are that behavior means to me that this person wants to run away, and therefore they're suspicious or it's a risky type of behavior. And the jury said no.
He just got up and got out to go to the grocery store.
Okay,
Deli.
Why would a person with 30 years of experience say that?
Well, I mean, I think Dr. Alpert, he, to me, did not have a grasp of the facts as well as I hope any expert that we hire does. You know, when I showed him the image of the crime scene diagram, which should be front and foremost favorite, like this is what the crime scene looked like. This is what the CSI has determined the location of where the officers involved were, where the pistol location was after the shot. And when he was like shocked, he's like, I've never seen this before. How have you not seen that before? You're supposed to look through everything, and you should be able to know what's important as an expert.
So the teaching moment, I think, from what you just described and what I just previously described, which is one, his opinion about pre-flight indicators when the video clearly does not show anything like that, and two, his failure
reaching.
Yeah, his failure to even look at evidence that is germane to where the position of the gun is that he was not properly prepared for his testimony. That is what I think happened. And so if you're going to properly prepare an expert like Alpert, what you do is you sit with him, you walk him through the video. That's what you do. You're going to hire an expert. We didn't hire this expert. You sit with him, you go through the video, and then you stop and you ask him, what are your opinion here? And if he said to me, if I'm the lawyer who hired him, and he said to me, that's a pre-flight indicator, I would say, I want you in detail to explain how him getting out of the car and getting back into the car says that. And I would say, that's not a credible opinion. And I would tell him that in the preparation process. The second thing is that if he's going to come up there and say, they were justified in shooting him because he was reaching for the gun, I would have put everything that is inconsistent with that in front of him and say, okay, explain your opinion in the context of this diagram that he never saw. That, I think, is a good example, a good teaching moment of not properly preparing an expert.
See, I don't know, because I don't think I prepare experts. I think I go through them and have them explain things because I'm like, you're the expert. You need to help me explain what this is. What is this situation? And I don't think Alper ever did that with someone. Like he seemingly never had that conversation. It's interesting because that was very evident when I interviewed Alpert, and he's very academically minded. He's been a professor for a long time. I think he wasn't able to live in his opinions to be able to forcefully push back because he just didn't have it well thought out. So I think that's why he was a bad expert. It's because if you don't know the facts well, you don't have a proper opinion. You don't have a proper basis for your opinion. And so, if he could point to things that he could have that could back and bolster his opinion, he should have. He just never did.
Do you blame the expert for that, or do you blame the lawyer, or both? Because the lawyer hires him and prepares him.
Yeah, but this is an inquest. Theoretically, they're supposed to be neutral. So, like, you're not supposed to have your hand on a finger on the dial either which way.
I don't think you need to have your finger on the dial of which way in order to prepare an expert. To me, it demonstrated to me that he was not a well-prepared expert. And I think the teaching moment is anybody's going to take on an expert, a use of force expert, you have to walk that expert through the evidence, not to tell them what to say, but to ask them, looking at this piece of actual evidence, what is your opinion? Defend it to me. Defend it to me, because that's what they're going to have to do on the stand or under deposition. So I just think that he was a waste of money, a waste of time, and a waste of resources. I mean, taxpayers paid for this. This thing cost.
I don't think he was a waste. I don't think he was a waste.
But,
the jurors did think he was a waste. But I think he got us to a point of where this is not an easy cut and dry case. What I really took away from the verdict was the 6 jurors agreed on a lot more than they disagreed. They agreed that this was a tragedy. They agreed that this should have been preventable.
Yeah.
It should not have happened. And to a large extent, and correct me if I'm wrong, I never heard any opinions that were malicious to Mr. Faletogo. There was never any degradation of him.
Nope.
Or his character.
Nope.
Or of him being threatening, or of him being violent towards officers. None of that showed up in the verdict. What did show up was some of the jurors felt for the involved officer and the information that he was being provided by his fellow officers. Incorrect information may it be. What are you supposed to do if, during a high tense situation, I'm yelling at you, Mo, you better shoot this person, otherwise you're going to get shot, which is essentially, the hyped up that these other officers were doing, even though I'm stepping on the gun with my foot and pushing it away, and I know, or I should at least know, that the gun now is nowhere near Mr. Faletogo's hands. It's actually behind my foot. And so I think the jurors, that's why they deliberated so long. They were dealing with this tension of, how do I feel sympathy for this man that's dead and he should not have died this way? But also, how do I leave space for a man who's still alive and was given information that, in their opinions, or I think in the opinions, you would have to think this, justified that killing.
Well, 2 of them, notwithstanding whatever information he got, said he committed a crime. based on the evidence they reviewed.
Well, is that what it means?
Yeah, that means a crime occurred. That he killed him
because it was
by criminal
unjustified.
means. Yeah.
Yeah.
So two of them
Well,
said
so
that.
Explain, because you have the criminal defense background.
Yeah.
So explain and I know you were going back and forth about the definition of criminal means and what was it? The Washington Pattern Instruction on Criminal Means.
I can tell you that. Yeah.
Well, no, but so it's a chargeable offense.
Absolutely.
What is the charge?
The charge would be homicide, and the jury that gets to decide what degree of homicide occurred, murder. So there are various ways you can commit murder. You can commit intentional murder.
And this
case,
commit
reckless murder or negligent murder. Mm-hmm. And so what the jury just said, two jurors said, yeah, we understand all of this information about him being told things and other officers being culpable and involved, and the Seattle Police Department not training people well. But two of us think he still committed a crime. And the crime is murder because this is an inquest. And the purpose of an inquest is to determine the manner and means of a death. And the death was a homicide. That is the only thing inquests are for. They're not for burglaries, assaults. They're just for homicides.
Yeah.
Because it's the coroner who examines and determines death in the county, who has the inquest. And now this information goes to the King County prosecutor. And the King County prosecutor has to look at all this information and make a decision about whether or not to charge the officer. Now, the King County prosecutor already has said that there is no crime committed. They made that decision prior to this, which is not fair to the family. Mm. They never took into account the inquest process, the inquest determinations. So it's going to go back to them, and they have to now make a decision again.
Well, I guess my question was a little bit different than that. So there are differing forms of homicide, right? You went through them: intentional, negligent homicide. Does criminal means encompass all of those? Or is there, in this case, would it just be, this was a negligent homicide?
Criminal means encompasses all of those. Mm-hmm. The jury was not asked to say whether it was an intentional or a negligent killing. Mm-hmm. I asked the judge to give them the definition.
No, and that
judge
was
decided against it.
Yeah,
and so for our purposes, the verdict of two speaks for itself, and the comment of one speaks for itself, which was the comment that he was executed. Mm-hmm. So at least one juror believed that this was more than negligent killing, that there was something more there. And you had 6 police officers say that he was justified, and a police sergeant. So at least 2 jurors did not find their testimony credible. Mm-hmm. I think that that's important. That tells you that the system, the internal system, the Seattle Police Department, and the King County Prosecutor's Office is potentially internally flawed. Mm-hmm. Because the mindset and the perspectives that were brought to bear to decide that this killing was justified is all influenced by the mechanism of the government and the government culture and the government system. They're not public citizens that are making this decision.
Well, and I think that's why I ultimately stepped away from the inquest with a more positive appreciation for it, because, like I alluded to in the fact before, these 6 citizens, they all, they got along really well.
Yeah.
That was evident. But they all had a lot more in common on how they thought about this case than you look at a verdict and you're like, these people were for, these people were against. But their differences were really on how you explain the problem to them. And I think if we look at problems like this, like what I found so, I think, offensive from SPD's party line interpretation of this was, I don't remember how many officers you had on there that said, if I had more experience, I would have shot him too. And it's like, that was gross to me. And you had 6 citizens basically saying, no, this should not have happened. Rejecting that completely. That party line policy was rejected. And so I don't see how you grow as a police force without acknowledging our party line is not aligned with what the citizens of our community deserve. Because I don't think the citizens of King County deserve a police force that is happier to pull a trigger. And I think that was hearing that from certain officers was not okay.
What's next?
I don't know. What do you mean?
For the case. Is it over?
Oh. Well, that's TBD.
To be determined?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think what's next is that I don't think that this story is over. I think there's more to it. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to seeing, what the county does, but also considering the fact that what happened in the case where information that we wanted to present to the jury was withheld from them was done appropriately or not. So I don't think that the case has necessarily come to an end. I know that the Faletogo family hasn't come to an end for them, and it's devastated them. But I think that the verdict was a successful verdict because we faced a significant amount of challenges, obstacles. We were limited in the types of questions we could ask, and yet we were able to convince 2 jurors.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty important. I think you did a fantastic job.
Yeah, no. I think, we'll see how the inquest process continues into the future. There was questions about whether the families should be represented, whether the involved officers should have separate representation. And, the jurors, we asked them point blank, hey, do you think it's helpful to have the parties represented? And they seemed to think it showed that perspective. Do I think it's a kangaroo court? Jury's still out on it.
I think it's a kangaroo court.